not better the case for his countrymen, that, being an accomplice in the crime, making himself the leader in the persecution against the helpless girl, he was willing to be all this in the spirit, and with the conscious vileness of a cat's paw. Never from the foundations of the earth was there such a trial as this, if it were laid open in all its beauty of defence, and all its hellishness of attack. O child of France, shepherdess, peasant girl, trodden under foot by all around thee, how I honour thy flashing intellect, quick as God's lightning, and true as that lightning to its mark, that ran before France and laggard Europe by many a century, confounding the malice of the ensnarer, and making dumb the oracles of falsehood. It is not scandalous, it is not humiliating to civilization, that even at this day France exhibits the horrid spectacle of judges examining the prisoner against himself, seducing him by fraud into treacherous conclusions against his own head, using the terrors of their power for extorting confessions from the frailty of hope; nay, which is worse, using the blandishments of condescension and snaky kindness for thawing into compliances of gratitude those whom they had failed to freeze into terror. Wicked judges! Barbarian jurisprudents, that, sitting on your own conceit on the summits of social wisdom, have yet failed to learn the first principles of criminal justice, sit ye humbly and with docility at the feet of this girl from Domremy, that tore your webs of cruelty into shreds and dust. "Would you examine me as a witness against myself?" was the question by which many times she defied their arts. Continually she showed that their interrogations were irrelevant to any business before the court, or that entered into the ridiculous charges against her. General questions were proposed to her on points of casuistical divinity, two-edged questions which not one of themselves could have answered without, on the one side, landing himself in heresy, as then interpreted, or on the other, in some presumptuous expression of self-esteem. Next came a wretched Dominican that pressed her with an objection, which, if applied to the Bible, would tax every one of its miracles with unsoundness. The monk had the excuse of never having read the Bible. Monsieur Michelet has no such excuse, and it makes one blush for him, as a philosopher, to find him describing such an argument as weighty, whereas it is but a varied expression of rude Mahometan metaphysics. Her answer to this, if there were room to place the whole in a clear light, was as shattering as it was rapid. Another thought to entrap her by asking what language the angelic visitors of her solitude had talked, as though heavenly councils could want polyglot interpreters for every word, or that God needed language at all in whispering thoughts to a human heart. Then came a worse devil, who asked her whether the archangel Michael had appeared naked. Not comprehending the vile insinuation, Joanna, whose poverty suggested to her simplicity that it might be the costliness or suitable robes which caused the demur, asked them if they fancied God, who clothed the flowers of the valleys, unable to find raiment for his servants. The answer of Joanna moves a smile of tenderness, but the disappointment of her judges makes one laugh horribly. Others succeeded by troops who upbraided her with leaving her father, as if that greater Father, whom she believed herself to have been serving, did not retain the power of dispensing with his own rules, or had not said that for a less cause than martyrdom, man and woman should leave both father and mother. On Easter Sunday, when the trial had been long proceeding, the poor girl fell so ill as to cause a belief that she had been poisoned. It was not poison. Nobody had any interest in hastening a death so certain. Monsieur Michelet, whose sympathies with all feelings are so quick that one would gladly see them always as justly directed, reads the case most truly. Joanna had a twofold malady. She was visited by a paroxysm of the complaint called homesickness. The cruel nature of her imprisonment and its length could not but point her solitary thoughts in darkness and in chains, for chained she was, to Domremy. And the season, which was the most heavenly period of the spring, adds stings to this yearning. That was one of her maladies, nostalgia, as medicine calls it. The other was weariness and exhaustion from daily combats with malice. She saw that everybody hated her and thirsted for her blood. Nay, many kind-hearted creatures that would have pitied her profoundly as regarded all political charges, had their natural feelings warped by the belief that she had dealings with fiendish powers. She knew she was to die. That was not the misery. The misery was that this consummation could not be reached without so much intermediate strife, as if she were contending for some chance, where chance was none, of happiness, or were dreaming for a moment of escaping the inevitable. Why, then, did she contend? Knowing that she would reap nothing from answering her persecutors, why did she not retire by silence from the superfluous contest? It was because her quick and eager loyalty to truth would not suffer her to see it darkened by frauds which she could expose, but others, even of candid listeners, perhaps, could not. It was through that imperishable grandeur of soul which taught her to submit meekly and without a struggle to her punishment, but taught her not to submit, no, not for a moment, to calumny as to facts, or to misconstruction as to motives. Besides, there were secretaries all around the court taking down her words. That was meant for no good to her. But the end does not always correspond to the meaning. And Joanna might say to herself, these words that will be used against me tomorrow and the next day, perhaps in some nobler generation may rise again for my justification. Yes, Joanna, they are rising even now in Paris, and for more than justification. Woman, sister, there are some things which you do not execute as well as your brother, man. No, nor ever will. Pardon me if I doubt whether you will ever produce a great poet from your choirs, or a Mozart, or a Phidias, or a Michelangelo, or a great philosopher, or a great scholar. By which last is meant, not one who depends simply on an infinite memory, but also on an infinite and electrical power of combination, bringing together from the four winds, like the angel of the resurrection, what else were dust from dead men's bones, into the unity of breathing life. If you can create yourselves into any of these great creators, why have you not? Do not ask me to say otherwise, because if you do, you will lead me into temptation. For I swore early in life never to utter a falsehood, and above all a sycophantic falsehood. And in the false homage of the modern press towards women there is horrible sycophancy. It is as hollow, most of it, and it is as fleeting as is the love that lurks in uxoriousness. Yet if a woman asks me to tell a falsehood, I have long made up my mind that on moral considerations I will and ought to do so, whether it be for any purpose of glory to her, or of screening her foibles, for she does commit a few, or of humbly, as a vassal, paying a peppercorn rent to her august privilege of caprice. Barring these cases, I must adhere to my resolution of telling no fibs, and I repeat, therefore, but not to be rude, I repeat in Latin, excudent ali melius sperantia signa, credo equidem vivos ducent de marmor vultus, altius ascendent, atu caput eva memento, sandalo ut infringas referenti oracula tanta. Footnote. Our sisters are always rather uneasy when we say anything of them in Latin or Greek. It is like giving sealed orders to a sea captain, which he is not to open for his life till he comes to a certain latitude, which latitude, perhaps, he never will come into, and thus may miss the secret till he is going to the bottom. Generally, I acknowledge that it is not polite before our female friends to cite a single word of Latin without instantly translating it. But in this particular case, where I am only iterating a disagreeable truth, they will please to recollect that the politeness lies in not translating. However, if they insist absolutely on knowing this very night, before going to bed, what it is that those ill-looking lines contain, I refer them to Dryden's Virgil, somewhere in the 6th book of the Aeneid, except as to the closing line and a half, which contain a private suggestion of my own to discontented nymphs anxious to see the equilibrium of advantages re-established between the two sexes. End footnote. Yet, sister woman, though I cannot consent to find a Mozart or a Michelangelo in your sex, until that day when you claim my promise as to falsehood, cheerfully and with the love that burns in depths of admiration, I acknowledge that you can do one thing as well as